And I'm delighted to be joined now by Tom Burke, co-founder and chairman of E3G, the climate change think tank. Tom, thank you very much for coming in.
Happy to be here.
We've overachieved. This budget is spare. It means we can slow the pace and wait until the technology is ready or it's affordable.
Actually, it doesn't, but I'll come to that in a minute, because I think it's rather extraordinary for you, as a member of Parliament, to describe a climate change committee created by Parliament as unaccountable. Exactly what you're there for, is to account for it. If you created it unaccountably,
well, we can
that's
abolish
because
it.
Yes, of course you can.
We can abolish it.
Of course you can.
That is true.
Yeah, absolutely right.
But currently
if you think it's doing the wrong things...
Currently it is unaccountable.
No, it's not unaccountable.
Yes,
it's like saying every public body is unaccountable.
No, that's not true.
Well, who should it be accountable
to? That's not true, because normal public bodies are accountable to ministers. The Climate Change Committee is not accountable to ministers.
Parliament specifically said, in order to do something which I would have thought you would be very much in favour of, that it should be accountable to Parliament, not accountable to government, because governments don't always do what parliamentarians want them to do.
No, because our system of government is the executive runs day-to-day business on laws passed by Parliament, that ministers are accountable to Parliament, not other bodies, not third-party bodies. Ministers represent the decisions of government to a democratically accountable Parliament, and they then have the ability to change those decisions if Parliament doesn't agree. This doesn't apply with the Climate Change Committee. The chairman of the Climate Change Committee doesn't answer questions on the floor of the House.
No, that's true. It doesn't apply. You're absolutely right about it. It doesn't apply to the Climate Change Committee because Parliament decided it shouldn't do. And what's more, a government of which you are a supporter made that decision.
No, it didn't. No, the Climate Change Committee was established under the Climate Change Act under the Blair-Brown years. It predates this administration.
Even so, as a government with a clear majority, if you thought it was unaccountable and shouldn't be, you had a perfectly good opportunity.
But
you had a perfectly good opportunity to change the legislation.
But
you could have made it accountable in any other way you wish.
Accountability is the day-to-day accountability that a minister can be called to the dispatch box on any day Parliament is sitting to defend policy. This Climate Change Committee fellow sends out a letter saying what policy should be. We can't call him to the floor of the House of Commons to answer. He is only accountable if you take the nuclear option of abolishing his whole committee.
I'm sorry, you have many more options than that. You could make the Climate Change Committee accountable to a minister. If that's what you wish to do,
but then you're having ministerial accountabilities. Until you do that, it's not accountable, which was the point I was making.
But then you're making a rather trivial point.
No, I'm not. I'm talking about our standards of our Constitution, which is that ministers are accountable to policy, to Parliament for policy, not third-party bodies who are unaccountable. That's the whole point of them.
But there are an enormous number of public bodies that are not directly accountable. They are only accountable through ministers. If you think this body should be, you have two questions to answer. Why, in the first place, did Parliament, of which you were a member, agree for it not to be accountable in that traditional way?
I wasn't a member when it came in.
Well, forgive me, I haven't been following your career that closely.
No, but if you say these things, you ought to get them right.
Well, that's absolutely true, as should you. And the key point is you've always been able to make an amendment, to move, to try and change that, to have private members' bill, lots of tools.
Private members' bills never get through like that.
Well,
as you know perfectly well.
Because as you know perfectly well, the reality is if the Climate Change Committee was acting in a way that was contrary to our Constitution, you have a whole range of things you can do about that.
Our constitutional system works on the basis of ministerial accountability to Parliament, that when you set up third-party bodies that are not directly accountable, then their decision-making can go on unchallenged. This is a bad precedent, and it's done with other bodies, you're quite right, and this has been one of the great mistakes of public policy in recent years. You've got Natural England and other bodies, the Environment Agency, that are similarly unaccountable, and it leads to decisions being made that my constituents can't get changed. If they come to me and seek redress of grievance over a decision made by a minister, then you can use parliamentary mechanisms to hold that to account. When it's made by an unaccountable body, you can't. This reduces our democratic rights. This is bad government.
I'm always in favour of increasing our democratic rights. Absolutely right. I go for proportional representation right away. I know you won't support that. But if you feel so strongly...
Makes us less well represented.
If you feel so strongly about that, and you have members in your government, which has now since 2010 been in charge, why have you not done anything to change it? If you think this is a really important constitutional issue, why are we having this debate now? Because it's the first time I've had this debate with anybody.
Because these bodies made sense when we were still a member of the European Union. It's part of the change of Brexit. Why did they make sense then? Because the rules they were following weren't accountable to Parliament, but were from the European Union. And what we've done is we have disconnected from the European Union and left these bodies with no accountability. And this is a terrible political mistake, because this Climate Change Committee risks ruining our economy. And we've seen the electricity figures, the decline in electricity usage that we have had, and the lack of economic growth and lack of productivity growth that we've had. And we've got a climate change committee that is compounding that. And what we want is ministers who are sensitive to public opinion, sensitive to the electorate, changing these decisions. And this is something that needs to be done.
I think it's quite an extraordinary thing for you to blame our absence of growth on the Climate Change Committee. I wish it were that powerful, but it really isn't.
I blame it on our high energy prices, which come in part from the Climate Change Act and from the Climate Change Committee. Yes.
Well, actually, they come more, especially the bills for people, ordinary people who live every day in our economy. They come from the fact that this government stopped helping people to insulate their homes, and so bills have gone up.
That's a tiny proportion of it. It comes from the fact. It comes from the fact that we are, through policy measures, putting extra charges on bills through the extra charges of the network that come to prepare it for getting to net zero.
Well, I'm very interested.
This is adding 20 or 30% to our bills.
In what you think is minor. The cost, because of the energy price guarantee, the cost of not having insulated the houses we would otherwise have insulated is about £12.5 billion. So why do you think that's
because you're taking an extraordinary period when we underrate people's bills, when prices raise very heavily. Prices come right back down.
Oh, that's true. And if
we'd had fracking, we would never have got into this position, which would have been a marvellous, cheap source of energy. And now what we do is we import fracked gas from the United States at a higher price. It's a crazy policy.
Well, it was crazy policy to try and do it. The idea that we were ever going to frack gas economically in Britain was just an idea of
We're sitting on billions, trillions of cubic feet of gas.
Well, we're also
which would be much cheaper.
We're also sitting on billions of tons of coal.
We should use that too, but that's our discussion next time.